Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're running just a minute behind schedule right now. Come on in, find a seat. Got a great talk for you today. Okay, let's get started. Hello again. Welcome. My name's Alan Barr. I'm with COEH Northern California. And on behalf of the NIOSH-supported education research centers throughout the country, we're pleased to bring you, I think, the final installment of the 2025 ERC Ergonomics webinar series, where we offer free monthly webinars on various topics on human factors and ergonomics. This collaborative effort on behalf of each ERC's continuing education program aspires to provide access to current research supported through NIOSH ERC programs. If you logged in via your registration email today, you will receive a link to an evaluation form, and that form will qualify you for a certificate of completion worth one continuing education contact hour. For today's webinar, if you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please enter it into the Q&A, not the chat, and we'll save some time at the end of the presentation to address your questions. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available along with past webinars on the COEH Northern California YouTube channel. In support of our work, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel as we continue to grow it. A PDF of the presentation can be requested directly from COEHCE at berkeley.edu. That's COEHCE at berkeley.edu. Okay, the title of today's webinar is The Cold Hard Facts of Job Rotation. And we're lucky enough to have three guest speakers today. And we'll start by introducing Merci Omoifo-Irefo. And Merci is an accomplished occupational safety and ergonomics scholar with over 2 decades of professional experience spanning academia, research, industrial safety, and advanced training program development. She's currently a graduate research assistant and PhD candidate in occupational safety and ergonomics at the College of Medicine, University of Cincinnati, where she conducts research on cognitive physical workload interactions, aerosol exposures, job rotation optimization, firefighter hyperthermia, and applied human factors in high-risk environments. Before joining the university, Merci served as a senior academic staff member at the Petroleum Training Institute in Nigeria and was the pioneer coordinator of the Institute's Fire Academy, where she designed national level safety training curricula, coordinated fire response simulations, and led multidisciplinary safety initiatives. A published researcher and seasoned conference participant, she has contributed to international scholarship in safety science, environmental health, and human factors. Our second speaker for today is Amour Cornelius Dondi. Amour is currently in his 4th year of doctoral studies at the Department of Environmental and Public Health Sciences at the University of Cincinnati. He has a Master's of Science in and an Associate Safety Professional certification. His research centers on occupational exposures and safety protocols in healthcare environments, where he investigates hazard identification, exposure assessment, and control strategies. Drawing upon his extensive field work and interdisciplinary collaboration, Amour develops and validates evidence-based interventions aimed at protecting both patients and healthcare workers from chemical, biological, and physical risks. His long-term goal is to translate academic findings into practical safety programs and policies that improve health outcomes across diverse healthcare settings. And finally, our third speaker for today is Dickson Rungere. Dickson is a third-year PhD student, at the University of Cincinnati in the Department of Environmental and Public Health Sciences. He's pursuing occupational safety and ergonomics. He's a certified student hazardous material manager and holds a BS in environmental engineering from the University of Dodoma in Tanzania. His research focuses on reduction of risk of work-related musculoskeletal disorders and ergonomic risk factors among automobile mechanics and technicians. His ultimate goal is to learn and contribute to developing and implementing effective health and safety programs beyond mere compliance, focusing on innovation and prevention with private sector organizations to ensure safety. And with all that, it is my pleasure to hand the microphone over to Mercy as our first speaker. Thank you, Mercy.
Thank you very much, Will. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once more. Yeah, like he said, I'm here with my team to present the cold hard fact of job rotation. Now, we were privileged to be part of a recent study where job rotation research was carried out by experts in the field, and then we were able to practice the framework for executing job rotation was identified in that study, emphasizing preventive hazards and strategies and their avoidance. And then this gave us the privilege to join these experts in assessing the scheme level exposures and demonstrating how job rotation is being used to mitigate risks as low as reasonably practicable. So, what is job rotation? Before we go into what we found, what the assumptions were, I'll briefly give a foundation of what job rotation was, the assumptions we found, and then what the fact actually is. Now, job rotation is an administrative control that rotates employees through different jobs during a shift. And then this dispels biomechanic loads from across different regions of the body. It is aimed to evenly distribute this biomechanical stress across different parts of the body so that you're being able to share the load moving from one part of a significant part of human body to another significant part without stressing a particular part so much. So it is not a substitute for engineering control, but rather an administrative control because it stands in the hierarchy of administration to be able to help manage the risk that have been identified to be able to leverage on what the engineers had already set up. But it also helps to be able to merge with engineering control to achieve the purpose of mitigating risk. What are the benefits of job rotation? First, it enhances cross trainings and skill diversification. It helps to be able to produce variability in stress across different body regions. And then it has the ability to cover absence to ensure production damages are met. And then it also reduces monotony and increase job satisfaction. Most supervisors use job rotation as a means of scheduling their job tasks and having breaks in driving job rotation schedules. But however, job rotations becomes beneficial if it is rotated through every region of the body without lacking concentration on a particular region or paying emphasis more on a particular region than the other. Before we go deeply, I would like to share previous research that had been carried out in assessment for job rotations by different other researchers. And we went through the literatures and found out that they had job rotation studies going on, but majority of these job rotations concentrated on the individual body parts, especially the lower body parts and then the lower back. While some, especially Mondela and Maditels, they and their groups found out that job rotation can be used actually, but it may also increase biomechanical risk for some workers. So we found out that a gap in evaluating overall exposures across rotation in various jobs were found. And so this recent study by Rungere et al., which we've just published, showed a lot of gaps, showed a lot of assumptions that were there on the literatures, and then the ones we finally found in real time, and then actually now closing up those gaps to find out that we have an effective job rotation scheme in individual job places moving forward. So when actually can we utilize job rotation? Job rotation is appropriate when you find out that there are tasks that involve constraining body part stresses. So in other words, both the distal upper extremities, the shoulders, the legs, and the arms are being stressed while those individuals carry out those tasks. then job rotation is appropriate. Job rotation can also be introduced when control over sequences and time can be maintained without negatively impacting production. So in other words, while you're rotating the job, it's not delaying production. Production is met at its maximum, and then people are carrying out their tasks without inches. And then the job rotation can be adopted. It could also be adopted when you have jobs that are similar. Okay, they have the same break patterns, they have the same schedules. Then you can introduce job rotation. And finally, here on our presentation, job rotation can be appropriate when management buys into it. For most of the time, when you find out that there are tasks that needs to introduce job rotation to reduce minimum stress, management might not buy into it. So when management and union buy into job rotation tasks to ensure that it reduces risks and minimizes the stress that their workers go on, and then it will be appropriate to use a job rotation. Like I said, that in the previous literatures, we found out that there were actually some gaps and assumptions that past researchers had based their publications on, or whatever they have found. Or most of the time, most of these companies that have high risk job have these assumptions that on job rotation that are really not the case or compared to what we found out. So the first assumption is that all body parts stress is equal. This wasn't true. Our findings did not show that body parts are equal. All body parts cannot be equal because stress region specifics differs from one region to another. So in other words, the wrist and the arm, the shoulder and the lower back have different tolerance and failure mechanisms. So the stress that the shoulders will take on the task will be different from what the wrist and the arms will take. So job rotation must deliberately alter dominant body regions rather than treating it as a whole basket. So you treat the entire rotation as one instead of treating them individually. So you find supervisors having job rotation for 8 hours or 6 hours. So instead of, then every 2 hours, they rotate the job. So instead of using specific body regions for each specific task, they use the same. Maybe there's a particular task that have an upper extremity task involving an upper extremity, and then they rotate the job for another 2 hours and use the same body parts for the same upper extremity, and then the third over and over. They have not actually rotated any job to reduce the stress, but rather they have accumulated the stress and the strain on that particular individual using his upper extremity without looking at the task variations and without looking at considering altering the task. The second assumption is that risk is minimal by changing jobs. So when specific jobs are changed from one particular job to the other, it is assumed that it has less exposure to high risk. This was not what we found. Now, we found something completely different. Simply adding jobs and shortening strings doesn't ensure that risk goes away or risk drops. Risk falls when the next job demands differ in terms of the utility of the muscles that have been used, the exertion, the posture, the changes and the alterations of the postures, and then the amount of forces that have been applied to this specific job task. Then you could say that risk could drop because actually in job rotation, for you to be able to successfully implement job rotation to meet up the goal and the task, it has to come from a high risk task into a lower risk task. So in other words, when you're using the upper extremities, you decide to change completely maybe to the leg, you change completely to the hand, and then this task rotates between the different body parts, and then you're not stressing this particular body region more than the other, and then you're actually carrying out an effective job rotation. The third assumptions was that order is inconsequential, so meaning sequence do not matter. That has been the assumption of job rotations. For those that are using job rotations, they just use it without placing sequence into place or consider sequence into place. As long as they move employees from one job station to another, to them it is job rotation. This is not the case because sequence do matter, because cumulative load and short-term recovery windows depend on what comes next. So if I have a task that is so demanding and high risk task, I should not move from that specific task to the next task that has a high risk task as well. It should taper down into a lower risk task and a less lower risk task and using different body parts. And then I can assume, okay, that it is actually meeting its demand. So sequence actually matters because rotations should avoid stacking high demands back to back. It should intervene between lower demands and alter the regions, and then it will meet its goal. The third assumption says that psychosocial factors can minimal impact on risk. We found out that psychosocial loads are maybe like pace pressures, mental demand efforts, low controls, hours of sleep, cumulative disorders. These are psychosocial factors that these individuals face as they carry out these tasks. Do they have a minimal impact on them? Yes, they do. And they have this minimal impact on them when they are cumulative and when it applies to physical strain of these body parts without recovery. So when there are not recovery from a high risk parts that have been accumulated, and then they jump again into those same jobs without the period of recovery, without a period of rest, without the stress and the strain being reduced, then the psychosocial factors, instead of becoming minimal, it could actually increase the risk of an individual psychologically carrying out the task. The fifth assumption says selected job rotation schemes are correct. Job rotation do not have to do with the task, but have to do with the scheme. And selected job rotation risks may not be correct if we do not pay cognitive to the specific coverages that needs to be done in terms of having a cross training, in terms of looking at the design of the job, in terms of considering the anthropometries of the individuals carrying out those tasks in those specific locations. In terms of the body map, not what kind of body regions will be used for this task, what should be the next to be used for the next task. If these are not put into consideration, then there is no way that we can say that selection of job rotation schemes are correct. They could only be correct if and only if hypothesis mappings are being done to look at these various aspects of the job region, the body region, the demand per the station, which the people are supposed to be carrying out this job, they enforce contract rules, the size and the limits, and the duration of tasks that is supposed to be carried out, and how long do they rotate this task, and then design it and re-verify what you have designed to prove if actually the processes are right, if there are changes, and then carry out checklists to be able to alter if we are actually making the risk reduced to its barest minimum, or we are actually compounding the risk. What is an effective job rotation? For job rotation to be effective, first, it should balance tasks that have different biomechanical demands. It should be effective when it is only crucial to consider both the physical and the psychological factors. And what we should actually be driving at is for effectiveness is that it should meet the goal to minimize the risk of injury at all times. So in summary, the impact of job rotation can either be beneficial or it can be detrimental. So depending on how you place it or how you put the consideration into it. So if it is beneficial, that is when you vary the area and pace the initial half of the work by categorizing into bringing down high risk and tapering down from high risk to low risk and putting into considerations the mappings and the designs of the job, then you could say that job rotation will be beneficial. And then it could be detrimental when you pile up continuously identified load on top of each other, moving from a high-risk job to another high-risk job to another high-risk job without looking at the job and the job that last constructs and being able to strike a balance between how these individuals vary from one task to another, and then it will not be effective. So that being said, about the basic foundation about what job rotation is, how it could be effective, and how to be able to close out the gap, I would introduce you to our research that will be handled by Mr. Dickson to tell you what we found in real time in our research. Mr. Dickson, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mercy. Hi, everyone. My name is Dickson, and I'll dive into what we have found in our research. We actively went to the site and we observed and quantitatively and how the job rotation is being done, how the schemes are being arranged, what do they pay attention and what do they not pay attention. So the objective of our research job rotation was to evaluate the job rotation schemes quantitatively for the work-related musculoskeletal disorder risks across the multiple body parts, the body part discomforts, and the psychosocial demands from the workers themselves. And the research was done in the Midwest, United States. Two research teams were involved in this research, one from the University of Cincinnati, another one was the Wichita State University. And prior to conducting our research, we had to seek for IRB approval since we are dealing with humans as participants in the study. So this one is a requirement. And before going into do the research, we had to recruit the companies and the people who will be interested in. So the first part was recruiting the companies through the connection that our devices had, through emails, and through visiting the actual companies and see if they practice the rotation and could allow us to come in. After the consent from the companies, we went over and recruited the participants. We asked the participants if they could be interested by explaining first the job rotation, our study, what's our study about, and what we need to achieve from the whole thing, and how we're going to share them these results with the company for improvement. And after that, after getting the consent and everything, now we collected the demographic survey as a baseline from the participants on the education level, marital statuses, race, ethnicity, hours worked per shift, numbers of days worked per shift, and the time worked in the company as well. After that, we give them the discomfort survey as a baseline too, to initially collect how do they feel. I mean, in terms of pain, how do they feel initially before they start the work in the morning? And after they complete that, we allow them to continue with their task as scheduled by the company. We don't interfere with that. And we use three observation tools, ergonomic observation tools, which were the lifting fatigue failure tool, do it, distal upper extremity tool, and the shoulder tool, which is a TST. And after every task, before they rotate to another task, we provide them another discomfort. So that discomfort will be collecting on the how do they feel about or the pain wise from the previous job before they shifted to another job. And also we give them the psychosocial demand survey, only one, which only tracks about the individual task. And at the end of the shift, we provide them another psychosocial survey, which collects the psychosocial demands on the whole rotation from when they started up to the end of the shift. And overall, we had 82 participants collected from four companies. One was the automotive assembly company. The second one was surgical instrument manufacturing company. The third one was the endoscopy device and assembly company. The fourth one was the piping manufacturing. The first company, which was automotive, they had 4 rotation. The second one had 3 to 10 rotation schemes. The third one, 2 to 11. Another fourth one was having like 8 job rotation schemes. So this one shows us there were variation in terms of job rotation schemes. We had those which are specific, I mean, definite job rotation schemes that they rotate after time. They don't change. And we had companies which change from 2 to 3 based on the demand of the job, based on the presence of the workers at that day at their job, and if they're required to be somewhere else, and also skills. Skills, if this person is not supposed to be here, maybe his or her skills are supposed to be somewhere else, so they change, and that will change the job rotation scheme of the person throughout the day. So it was kind of, it was not definite, and it was definite in other companies. And these are the assessment tools we used. One of them was the lifting fatigue failure tool. This assessed the lower body, the lower back, the cumulative stress from the manual lifting based on the fatigue failure theory. So when we talk about the fatigue failure theory, it comes from the failure of the musculoskeletal system after repetitively exposing them to the force or exhaustion. You can keep on continuing to do the same task without recovery time. So it reached to the point that the body cannot regain to its original part, the musculoskeletal system, they cannot regain, and that's where people start feeling continuous pain. So whether they rest or they don't rest, they still have pain because the body has reached that point where it cannot come back to its original state. And the three information that I required in this tool was the weight of the load, the horizontal distance from the center of the body into to the center of the load while they're lifting, and also the number of repetitions. On this slide, the right part, the right side of the slide shows how the tool looks like, and at the end, it provides us the probability of high risk of the job. It gives us a number and also in colors. If it's green, that job is safe. It's yellow, the job is like in between, that it requires immediate change. And if it's red, I mean, the job should be stopped immediately and the change should be applied before continuing with the job. The second tool was the distal upper extremity tool. This one evaluates the cumulative damage or the cumulative stress associated with the upper extremity during the workday based on the fatigue failure theory as well. And this one requires the information such as rating of the intensity of the exertion through Omni-Res scale, and the number of repetitions. So the Omni-Res scale, the way we collected this one was through dynamometer, the instrument where people measure the amount of exertion that a person used. So when we approach the participant during their work, or before that, we give them the dynamometer. We ask them to squeeze as much as they can with all strength, and we rate that one as 10. So whenever they're performing tasks, we'll be asking them, so based on that 10 that you previously applied to the dynamometer, how much do you think, how much force do you think you have used on a scale of 0 to 10? So that's how we use to rate it, and they'll give us whether they feel it's 2 or 3 or 4. So this one was totally subjective based on what they feel. The third one was the shoulder tool, which assessed the cumulative trauma to the shoulder based on the fatigue failure theory during the workday. Requires the weight of the load, requires the horizontal distance from the acromion to the center of the load, the acromion, the bone here, which is at the shoulder, to the center of the load, and the number of repetitions as well. On the right side, this is the shoulder tool, how it looks like, and it's at the end, it gives us the total cumulative damage of the tasks that are being performed, and also the probability of the shoulder outcome in terms of risks. And on top of that, we had surveys, and we had the body discomfort survey that was initially provided before they perform the task, and after every individual task that they finish before they rotate to another one, we give this body discomfort survey also to rate how do they feel. I mean, how much pain do they feel on these body parts that are marked on the right side from 0 to 10. So the scale was 0 to 10. So the rate from the head, right and left shoulders, left and right hand and wrists, all these body parts, they were on the paper. So they had to only cycle the scale how they feel. And we had the individual job questionnaire. So we were providing this after every job that before they rotate to another one. This one used to collect data on the mental concentration, the quantitative demand, the temporal demand, perceived effort, and the performance. As you can see, they rated that one from 1 to 9, 1 being the lowest, 9 being the highest, and rarely, occasionally, sometimes, often. And these are the questions. They were like 4 pages. So this is only part of it. And the tool was extracted from NASA TLX. And the survey, another survey was the entire rotation scheme questionnaire, which would assess the psychosocial demand for the entire rotation at the end of the shift. So this was collecting the information about job control, the social relationships of the between the co-workers or from the supervisors, the managers, plus the job satisfaction. From that one now, I will share the results that we had from the research that we conducted, and these are the results. These are the probability of the high risk group-wise, and we had the right and the duet one, the lift, the right and left shoulder too. We didn't have so much of risk in the shoulder, and the lift because most of the tasks of these companies that we attended were done on upper extremity, and mostly it was hand part. That's why we have high duet results compared to the lift and the right shoulder. And as you can see from one task to another task, this showed like every task they went to still required them to use the same body parts. There were no like biomechanical load distribution to like probably from this task to another task, they require them to have another body part used. But this shows that from one task to another task, they still require them to use hands repetitively. So this at the end of the day becomes cumulative and increases the risk to musculoskeletal disorders. And this was the discomfort was, and from our results, we found that the significant increase in the discomfort was observed in the right elbow and the upper back as the shift was progressing. And overall body part, the rating generally remained below 3. And as you can see, from one job to another, the discomforts were increasing. Well, not that much to 10 or 9, but it was kind of increasing. And these are the psychosocial demands and psychosocial factors, the mental concentration, the quantitative demands and job rotation, job control, mental demand, physical demands, temporal demands, performance, and effort. So as discussed by my colleague, the job rotation does not only depend on the ergonomic part and arranging of the job, also psychosocial factors contribute into the discomfort of the people while they're performing their tasks. The mental ones, the physical demands, the perceived effort, the temporal demands, all of these contribute into the job rotation and should be considered while designing it in order to reduce the risk to musculoskeletal disorder. Now I'll discuss the challenge that we had during the data collection. First of all, the challenge was following up the participants. As I said, some of the shifts were irregular. They just went according to the demand and stuff, and what they have arranged, the supervisors and the managers. So we had to follow up the person wherever they go. They might be in this rotation, and you know that rotation probably during the day was 5. Today is doing 5 jobs, but after some time, since due to the requirement, they'll be shifted to another station, and you have to follow that. And probably the previous station that you were following, you were also following more than one person. So that was kind of being challenged to make sure we follow up the participants wherever they go. And sometimes they were in a rotation and then end up being floaters. I mean, not being at work at that time, probably reserved when they needed to. So now they don't work no more. And we have to like try to find another person to follow up during the day or the next day. And the data collection, we didn't want to impact the productivity because that wasn't our deal. We wanted the production to continue, collect according to production. And that was the hardest part of it, taking the measurements, asking some questions for us to get details about the task, to fill the data collection sheet. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but we are happy most of the companies were giving out, or even the supervisors were trying to come in and take the space of the worker so we could have those questions asked and some measurements and all. For example, the dynamometer one to get the Amour scale, you need to stop the job for them to do that. But since we were having the good cooperation, some of the supervisors were dumping in order to help us to get those. And also there was a difficulty in understanding those rotation. From 3 rotation to 11 rotation, even the time of rotation is not different. It might be 30 minutes, it might be 50 minutes, it might be 2 minutes, it might be 2 hours, even some will stay in one job for 5 hours. So try to understand that pattern of job rotation was also difficult for us, but we ended up managing it by working together with the supervisors. Like before they change, before they try to do anything else, please can you try to tell us? We would follow and we will be able, we are happy to go wherever you guys want to. And keeping track of the workers where they are, that was also a challenge to us. The measurements that we were taking from people while they're working. So you are trying to take a measurement to read precisely what was the number, and now you are the guy is changing the postures due to the work because they're working in time. They don't need to lose that productivity time. And a few participants also dropped out during the data collection due to the surveys. As you can see, after every task, you are filling the surveys. And if you are having 10 jobs or 11 jobs per day filling the task for other people, it was kind of a burden, and we didn't have no control with that. Whatever they choose, and some did drop out. So this was the results and what we did in our data collection. I would love to hand over this to my colleague, Amour Dondi, to explain further more about the facts and on the finding we had. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Now, I'm Amour Dondi. I had the pleasure of taking part in this research, and I'm very happy to discuss what these findings that have been articulated by my fellows, what they mean in the real world settings as far as job rotation as an administrative control is being used mostly in many industries. So Mercy started by giving you kind of the background, what's out there with the literature as far as job rotation is concerned and what is perceived to be true. And then Dickson came in and gave the overall picture of the research we did out in the manufacturing settings and industries. And now I'm here to kind of discuss what we believe are the cold hard facts that we found from the real world data collection as far as job rotation is concerned. Number one, we would try to compare the rotation as a scheme, the overall rotation scheme, vis-a-vis the individual job risk. Well, we identified that in a nutshell, the overall scheme as job rotation being used as a control, the risk was often higher than the individual job risk, that particular task that a worker does before they're being rotated to another portion. We'll use the lifting fatigue failure tools, such as the distal upper extremity, the shoulder tool, and we identified that the overall cumulative exposure across the multiple job increased the total risk, right? This is because of the biomechanical load identified by the tools. Once we did the biomechanical assessment utilizing the lifting fatigue failure tools, the overall results was that the risk was higher compared to the one on the individual job tasks. So we expect then that job rotation is a control in redistributing this biomechanical load to prevent the effect on a similar muscle group. But this was not the case in the real world data collection because the biomechanical load and the psychological factors were not taken into account when a scheme is being made in such a way that a worker is rotating frequently from one job to another, different names of the job, but similar task and similar biomechanical demand on the same localized body part, showing that then it's the same part that at the end of the day, from that rotation, a worker has been exposed to similar biomechanical demands, and the overall effect then it's a high risk, which poses opportunities for various work-related injuries, which is the opposite of what one could expect as far as job rotation being used as a control from the hierarchy of hazard control being in the administrative aspect. And then rotation did not reliably reduce the risk because the tasks, as I said, were often stressing the same body regions, particularly the upper extremities, because most of the tasks involved working using your hands in the upper extremities other than the lower extremities. And then when you look at the biomechanical assessment, comparing that to the discomfort correlations, well, one, we used Do-It as one of the lifting fatigue failure tool that we used during assessment of the biomechanical load. And this tool kind of looks at the upper extremities, such as the hands and the wrists, and realized that the findings, the overall cumulative damage were correlated with the hand and wrist and elbow discomfort, showing that then this is the localized body parts that the worker is using in doing different tasks. And when you rotate to another task, they use this. These are the same body parts that are exposed to the biomechanical load. And when you change them to another task, it's the same. This was even worse to other undefinitive, to the non-definitive job rotation schemes where workers had to work more than 4 jobs from different 4 jobs. So this kept on increasing, showing that there's a discomfort there, and we did not expect this because job rotation is perceived to be a control for that, other than posing more problems in that perspective. And then the shoulder tool, we utilize this tool in understanding the cumulative damage and the discomfort on the shoulders, and the findings correlated with the shoulder discomfort, showing that then this calls for a problem as workers rotated. The tasks that involved shoulder overreach, it posed some discomfort in that area. There was no much tasks involving the lifting aspect. So from the lifting tool, we had fewer tasks, but when we assessed the results of those tasks, they did correlate with the lower back or hip discomfort, showing that then these are the lifting fatigue failure tools, showing that they are correlating to the discomfort, meaning in that particular job rotation scheme, we are failing to redistribute the biomechanical load and creating problems in these localized body regions. As I said, many tasks like lifting tasks, about 32%, had no lifting, limiting the risk redistribution in that perspective. Again, these tools proved to correlate to support the predictive value of task level tools for specific body regions, showing the efficiency of these tools in assessment of the biomechanical load and the biomechanical demand of the respective jobs included in the job rotation scheme. Psychosocial factors, very important ones. When one wants to create a stringent and effective job rotation scheme, one should also include the psychosocial factors. This includes the psychological aspect and the social aspect of the job. So what we found then, the mental demand, the physical demand, and the perceived effort continued increasing as the number of jobs increasing. This was even worse for the job rotation schemes that had more than 4 jobs. And we also noted a notable rise in perceived effort beyond the 4 jobs, and this correlated much with the upper extremity discomfort. This is because most of the tasks involved that were conducted in the respective manufacturing industries involved upper extremities mostly than the lower extremities. And the few tasks that we were looking from the lift perspective, looking into the physical demand, they correlated with the back discomfort, showing that, well, in that particular scheme, then it's important, one, to include the psychosocial aspect of things. And then this suggested the cumulative mental fatigue and effort may also be undermined in a rotation, and this can then diminish the value of the job rotation scheme, because these are the 2 other factors that needs to be considered when you're generating a rotation scheme. And then supervisors, we all know supervisors play a greater role in driving the safety management system and ergonomic management at the shop floor, because they spend time with the industries, with the industrial workers. So they have some contributing factors in either positively impacting the job rotation scheme or negatively impacting the job rotation scheme. So in the real world data collection, we noticed that supervisors frequently adjusted the rotations in real time for production needs. We saw some workers being pulled off from the line, being taken into another line as the production demand arose. So that then gave a picture that rotations, mainly we take rotation, we use job rotation as a control for ergonomic risk factors. But then what we saw, basically rotation prioritized operational needs over the ergonomic load variation. So this can also be a diminishing factor when you're trying to have an effective job rotation that will lead to control of ergonomic loads and ergonomic risk factors and create overall safety for the workers. So these practical constraints led to rotations that did not intentionally diversify or redistribute the biomechanical loads or the biomechanical demands from the biomechanical risk assessment perspective. And also this, again, back to psychosocial, looking at the psychosocial and cumulative load effect, the perceived effort, mental demand, and physical demand, we kind of saw that they kept increasing as the workers cycled through more tasks. So again, we should have a job rotation scheme that will aim to control these factors and promote worker safety. And also, we saw this was increasing. The increasing values were most notable beyond the jobs that beyond 4 jobs in the scheme. One company had a very good job rotation scheme in a manner that it was a laid out scheme with a laid out time, and there were only 4 jobs. That we consider that as a definitive scheme. But other companies did not have definitive scheme. We saw workers being rotated all over in different more than 4 jobs, and as they kept doing that, then we saw these risk factors increasing beyond those 4 jobs. And then fatigue and recovery needed to be considered along the biomechanical exposures. So limitations, like any other study, we did have limitations. One, this was a cross-sectional study, which involved observations at a particular time for a particular population or number of participants. And then we had only 4 companies in the manufacturing settings, so it cannot be used as a representative for all the companies in the country. And then this was a single day self-reported discomfort and not the injuries reported. So probably could have got a more broader picture by synchronizing our findings to the number of injuries reported. And then future directions. One would do more analysis in the entire job rotation scheme and the entire day, psychological factors and sleep as well. You could also look at the cumulative risk across jobs in the respective job rotation scheme, and you could determine the carryover effects on baseline discomfort. One could also look at longitudinal studies linking rotation patterns to the respective injuries, ergonomic-related injuries at the respective manufacturing settings to show the association between the two. And then one could also do comparison of the jobs for the entire day against the rotation scheme. And also, all this could result then in developing a job rotation optimization tool, which would assist practitioners, safety practitioners, supervisors, managers in balancing the musculoskeletal stress by synchronizing the lifting fatigue failure tools that would give you the overall picture of the biomechanical demand and taking into account the psychological factors of that particular job to be able to establish a scheme that will distribute these factors evenly and then make job rotation very effective in helping the workers instead of worsening the effects. So the conclusion, the key takeaways, number one is that, well, from our findings, it was clear that job rotation often failed to reduce the ergonomic risks in the overall, from the overall job rotation scheme. The task level tools or the lifting fatigue failure tools predicted regional specific or localized body parts discomfort. The psychosocial load increased with tasks, and that led to a positive link to the discomfort of the respective body parts, particularly the upper extremities. Effective rotation requires engineering as well. Now here, we would go back to a simple NIOSH hierarchy of hazard control. You will see engineering is up there compared to administration, where job rotation falls in. So job rotation alone may not be effective. It can be effective if it's also coupled with other engineering redesigns to ensure that we continue to keep the workers safe. The use of job rotation, well, what it does. One, it manages exposure over time by alternating tasks into different body regions, by taking into account the biomechanical load and the psychosocial factors. And these are stressed at different points and potentially adding recovery windows. What it does not do, well, it doesn't remove or reduce the underlying hazard at the station. And the most important note to use, it will be effective if it is paired with various engineering fixes. Would like to appreciate the support received in conducting this study from the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp, alongside with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, that provided grants and enabled us to travel across the Midwest during the data collection phase. We would like to strongly appreciate support from our supervisors, our mentor, Dr. Davis Kemet, who is a professor here at the University of Cincinnati, Dr. Sean Gallagher at Auburn University, Dr. Mike Jorgensen at the University of Wichita, and Dr. Susan Kotowiski at the University of Cincinnati worked with us. They coached us through different phases, and they were able to support this study. And yeah, well, I say thank you for listening, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amour, and thank you, Dickson and Mercy. Now we can move on to some questions. I see Mercy typing in the background, so some of these have been answered and fall into my answered queue, but I'm probably going to read some of those for the benefit of the audience as well. But let's just start at the top here. What psychosocial factors would you consider? Could you sort of rank order them? What should we not miss? So that what are the top 3 psychosocial factors that we should consider? The question was actually directed to Mr. Rungere, but anyone is free to answer that question.
Okay. On the part of the psychosocial factors was the mental demand factors, temporal demands, effort being done in a certain works. There's a discomfort, but there's an effort that person use while performing their tasks. And there are also relationship between the supervisors. Is it like more like a push you to do tasks to reach the goal of the company, or is it like a good relationship whereby they also listen about the demands that you have and they also do the correction depending on the demands? There are these relationships that you have with supervisors, and it's all about the goal of the company or the goal of the production, but not about the well-being of the person. That one also contributes to the discomfort of the person during the work. It's like work. Well, there's something that's wrong at the job. Like, no, keep on working. We fix that, or we will fix it. And also with your coworker, is your coworker also helping out? Do you guys have good communication? If you want to, it's the task that needs communication, handling 2 people. Can you talk and handle as a team the task, or is just there's no communication, you handle it alone? Is it low communication, high communication, or mild communication? Plus, okay. Job control. Do you have control in the job that you're doing, or is just whatever you're told is just what you're doing? Do you have control in the activity that you're doing? So those are some of the psychosocial factors that we considered.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's see. Another question came in that said, would you say that rotation did not reduce exposure, or that rotations as designed by these plants were determined to be ineffective?
I'll leave this to my colleague.
Yes, I think Mercy might have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would like to take that. Yes, from our overall conclusion where rotation was not effective, and we drew that conclusion from the biomechanical assessment we did, that the biomechanical load redistribution that we captured using the lifting fatigue failure tools failed to show that really there was that even distribution. We kept seeing that workers, even if they were moving from one job to another job, the name could be different, but the biomechanical load was the same. So at the end of the day, they had discomfort in the localized body regions, showing that, well, it was not effective. But also we noted that psychosocial factors, as he answered, were not really taken into account. Then the overall, so the results showed that really job rotation scheme that were available in respective settings was not effective for the workers.
Great, thank you. You mentioned on one of your slides, the future slide was going to be sort of a job rotation optimization tool. And I'm just curious, are there any such tools that exist on the market today? I mean, given there may be room for improvement, but is there anything available out there today?
Yes, I would answer that our research group is part of the main objective for this research was coming up at the end. The second objective was to come up with this job rotation optimization tool. We are working on this tool, and it will synchronize the lifting fatigue failure tools, the lift, do it, and the shoulder tool that we used, plus the psychosocial surveys. It will be a software that can assist practitioners right at the at the shop floor to kind of do these assessments and be able to understand the biomechanical demand of that job, the psychosocial factors of respective workers and their supervisor, and be able to establish an effective job rotation scheme. Yes, our group is working on that, but I do not know if there's any other optimization tool off the top of my head.
Got it. Thank you. That's exciting. I look forward to seeing the tool. Here's a question that Mercy already answered, and perhaps she could just answer it out loud for the audience. The question was, what was the length of time from rotation scheme introduction to data collection? The questioner was curious about the new or change effect, or thought that that more tasks is not better.
Okay, first and foremost, we didn't introduce the rotation scheme. They already had an existing rotation scheme. So we just observed based on what they had introduced our tools and used to collect our data based on the level of shifts that they had, the time durations, and how much they were able to rotate the job based on what skill they already had. And then that was what my colleague said. It varied from one job rotation to another, and from one company to another, and from one task to another. So we found that different organizations, depending on the design of your plant or the nature of your job, would determine the kind of rotation scheme that you would adopt. And then depending on the kind of design that already existed. So some understood the principles of rotating using the skills instead of just changing the task, because changing the task was actually not doing the job, but actually applying the skill, the job rotation skill, to make sure that the biomechanical loads were even, and then adjusting to the different anthropometries of the different individuals vis-a-vis the task design that was carried out currently, determined the effect of the job rotation. So we didn't introduce any job rotation to any company. We just followed what they had. That was why we were able to rule out the assumptions and what the facts were actually are. I don't know if I answered you correctly.
Thank you. Let's see, I have time for one more here, and it's one that you did answer in text, but is a 4-job rotation scheme a safe rule of thumb to follow when recommending job rotation as the interim protection for work-related sprains and strains? Can you talk more about that briefly?
Yes, absolutely, because having a 4 tax, the rule of thumb says by the 4th tax, no matter the body parts that is being used, people are wearing out already. So even if you follow the skills of moving from a high ranking risk job into a lower ranking one that's tapering down to reduce the risk, from the job's 4th rotation, in order not to wear these individuals off, it is absolutely good to practice 4 rotations. So we found out that some had up to like 9 rotations, 6 rotations, 11 rotations. And on these individuals, these are cumulative risk. And no matter what the design of the task will be, sometimes, like my colleague said, you could have somebody on a specific job for 5 hours using the same body parts. And then each job could have like up to 4, 5, 7, 10 tasks. So now when you now move from that specific task into another one with the same body to 2 to 3 to 5 to 10, no matter how much you rotate the body mechanism, you have developed the principles of minimizing the risks to their barest minimum. So yeah, literature-wise, practical-wise, 4 is the best and recommended. Thank you.
Great. And on that note, we'll bring this to a close. Thank you again to all of our presenters for an excellent presentation. It's a fascinating topic and I think important work, and look forward to the future developments. If you have any questions for us over here at COEH Northern California, you can drop us a line at coehce@berkeley.edu. That's coehce@berkeley.edu. I want to wish you all happy holiday season, and come back and join us next year for more of this exciting material. Okay, bye for now.
Thank you, Education, for having us. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.
Bye.